Howdy, my name is Nonat, and I'm really excited because I woke up this morning and I saw Asmongold finally got to react to the whole updated Orc license OGL situation. Now, I've watched Asmongold for years now, especially back when I was playing World of Warcraft and other MMOs. Asmongold was my go-to binge content. I'm talking like 12 hours straight of watching videos from over the last year, because he's just one of those creators who puts out so much content, you can leave them on like a freaking TV show for a month and still watch all new stuff. So I'm curious to see what he says. I have not watched Asmongold's first video about the original OGL leak, but I am curious to hear what he says about Paizo and the Orc license, especially because I don't believe Asmongold, he doesn't have a stake in the TTRPG game, so he's sort of an outside third party, so I'm really curious to see and react to exactly how he reacts and thinks of all of this drama, which has completely unearthed our genre of medium of game, I'm bad at words, into the more mainstream, to see what they're talking about now that it's more than D&D and Stranger Things. Let's find out.
Dungeons and Dragons, a game known for taking the mythology from all around the world, dragons, dwarves, goblins. Well, they're known for putting all of that together. And they've also decided that now it's theirs. And so they're thinking about shutting down other people that are making content about Dungeons and Dragons. The fuck? Yeah, that's basically it.
The fuck? Yeah. That's a succinct way to put the last 3 weeks.
Hasbro ruined Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering. Yes, so far.
I will say I didn't realize I was going to be reacting to Asmongold reacting to a video, but retroactively thinking about this for more than 12 seconds, it's Asmongold, so that makes sense. This is going to be a little bit of reactception.
Never watched this channel before. I don't know what to expect.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update of sorts to a video I did a few days ago talking about
that's Wrath of the Righteous
OGL drama and what that could mean for video games in particular, as this channel is centered around video games. Paizo, the publisher of Pathfinder, has put out a statement around D&D's...
Pathfinder, for anybody who doesn't know, is like, it's like a mod for Dungeons and Dragons.
Sorta. I'll give it, especially Pathfinder First Edition, I'll give you that. Pathfinder 2nd Edition, definitely not so much. 2nd Edition is much more than a mod over something. But for Pathfinder 1st Edition, it's as different from 3.5 as 3.5 was from 3.0.
And a new OGL has been floated and leaked, and we were supposed to see that update literally the day this video is going live, though I imagine it has been delayed. But the new update...
I feel like if the update's getting delayed, then they're probably not going to do it, or if they do end up doing it, it's not going to be in the same way.
So that's definitely the working theory. They're definitely going to do it. After seeing the Wizards of the Coast update on the situation, they're saying, yeah, the OGL's coming. You're not stopping us, but we're gonna make it a little bit better just for you, you special little D&D player, you. Which, again, their entire update just came across as condescending. I don't know if Asmon had seen the update at this point, because this is him talking about the Orc announcement, so it probably doesn't have the D&D Beyond update in it.
Essentially made it impossible for third-party creators to do anything with Dungeons & Dragons without turning literally all of it over to Wizards of the Coast to use however they see fit, which, needless to say, would...
Is that still not the case? Because my understanding is that if you make fan art of something, the official people that make the... Like, if you make fan art of, let's say, like World of Warcraft or something like that, any sort of IP... they can just turn around and use your fan art.
Yes, with an asterisk. This does apply to independent property. So if you make fan art of a Mind Flayer, an Illithid, or a Red Wizard of Thay, yes, Wizards can absolutely and legally should be able to claim that. That belongs to them. That is their intellectual property. That is totally fine. The issue that people are having problems with is that the OGL is trying to capture your mechanics. They are trying to be able to take unique gameplay mechanics you create that are possibly slightly based on the SRD, that's the System Reference Document, and if it is too close to the SRD, Wizards of the Coast is trying to claim your stuff as they're not trying to claim they own it, but it's the new OGL would have granted Wizards a perpetual irrevocable license to use that content in any way they want. Meaning if you upload and create a new class, even if that class steals 0 intellectual property from Wizards of the Coast, because it references the system reference document and you signed the OGL 1.1 if it came out, Wizards of the Coast could take your class and put it in a new book without paying you a cent.
Because it's technically their IP. Maybe I don't understand this, but that was what I thought.
Destroy that community. But in addition to third-party creators
could be
around the
different with Dungeons and
TTRPG, a
Dragons.
lot of
It
other
is, yeah.
companies use that OGL for a variety of
I'll throw it up on screen right now so you can see what I'm talking about. The big crux of the situation here is that legally in the US, you cannot copyright game mechanics. You can copyright something with enough literary or pictorial expression within it, as in, this mechanic is mostly based in storytelling. You can copyright that. You can copyright Melf's Acid Arrow, but you can't copyright Acid Arrow, if that makes sense, because Melf is literary expression. There is a wizard out there named Melf. This is his signature spell, the Acid Arrow. But you cannot just copyright the term Acid Arrow.
things. Pathfinder uses it for most of their system, and we'll talk more about that.
First
here,
edition
obviously,
does.
as we
Second
move through
edition
the
does not.
statement. But my own personal interest in why I'm talking about this on a video game channel is mostly due to the fact that a lot of my favorite games use a version of the OGL or D&D systems and rules.
So many more games than people think use the OGL. Roll for Combat posted a lot of really good ones. Like, I think there's a Lord of the Rings RPG which uses the OGL. There's a Star Wars RPG that uses the OGL. So, like, this would mean Disney owning Star Wars would have to deal with the OGL to get that all squared away. Although there's also a counter conspiracy or theory that anything that was already published will be safe, and they can't legally unauthorize 1.0a. Maybe they can stop people from being able to use it in the future, but anything already published under it will be safe. But again, a lot of this is legal theories because role-playing game legality is so fresh. It's so new. They've only needed to start worrying about laws of games in general for 50, 60 years, and then specifically role-playing games is even more niche. So what does and doesn't count as copyright and whatnot is still super in this gray, fuzzy limbo when it comes to a court case. Because, you know, if there's a 75-year-old judge running the case with a set of jurors that don't even know what tabletop role-playing is, they just know D&D is that game from Stranger Things, they can't make informed decisions, so no one knows exactly how the legal battles would go.
And thus the specifics of this affect great things outside of just the TTRPG space. Now,
That's what I'm wondering, is like, in my opinion, I feel like rolling a D20 or like a D6, D4, D10, whatever, I feel like that's so common now.
Exactly.
And so many games do it. Dungeons and Dragons doesn't own that anymore.
Oh, they never did. They absolutely never did. They might have been one of the innovators who first made use of it, but you cannot copyright, like I said, a game mechanic. You cannot copyright roll a D20. Now, you might be able to copyright roll a D20 and add your Hasbro bonus. You know, if you copyright that phrase, no other game can use the term roll a D20 and add your Hasbro bonus, because your Hasbro bonus, that's where it gets a little more literary and pictorial. I don't think you could copyright roll a D20 and add your attack bonus, because again, that's very common, it's very universal. There's no literary expression from attack bonus. But when you name it your Hasbro bonus, then it becomes literary expression, because you're using a proper noun, which doesn't usually define something like this universally, and making it work that way. Similarly, I believe the Dragon Age system could potentially copyright their style dice. That's possible because there is literary expression in the mechanic of the style dice, but even that would be a stretch.
So, like, whenever you really break it down, what does Dungeons and Dragons really own? Because they certainly don't own dragons.
Nope, they only
They
own
don't
their
own dungeons either.
So it's interesting. I'll pull it up real quick here. You want to know what Wizards of the Coast D&D owns? Right here. Right here. They own Dungeons & Dragons, D&D, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master, Monster Manual, Nine Hells of Bator, Mind Flayer, Book of Vile Darkness, Lady of Pain. They own this. This is what they own. this is what they can claim. If you're using these terms in your content, then yes, Wizards can sue you or demand you take it down or just gain ownership of that content because they own these identities. What they don't own is the mechanics.
They don't own half of the mythological animals that the game is built under. Like, if you look at a lot of the monsters in Dungeons and Dragons, even the more, fucking, like, arcane ones, the ones that you might not think of, or, the super powerful ones that are just, like, fucking these, like, weird monsters that are, like, cosmic horrors. Well, guess where the cosmic horrors came from?
Lovecraft!
Well, a lot of them came from Lovecraft. Or they came from Greek mythology, or they came from something else. So, like, what do they really fucking own? I don't know. I'm sure they have some original characters. Tarask, yeah. But no, I actually heard Tarask was...
That's mythology.
Like French mythology or something like that.
Yeah, the Tarask is not a D&D creation. That blew my mind last year.
Cthulhu? Well, so, like, what does D&D really own? I feel like the entire thing is derivative.
Everything's derivative.
Official
Absolutely.
word from Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, D&D, etc. We have gotten nothing. 2 days ago, they said they'd make a statement soon, and we have yet to hear from them. Well, Paizo got tired of waiting, and yesterday, from the time of this video, has released their own statement and what they plan to do, and I think this statement alone clarifies a lot of questions I had about the state of Pathfinder, because Pathfinder publishes via a license. The long and short of it is, they're planning on a system-neutral open RPG license to flat-out replace the OGL with. They're doing this in partner with a lot of other people, and once the license is fully developed, they plan on handing it off to a non-profit company that deals with open source as a rule.
That's such a freaking Chad move that I still can't get over. It's been 2 or 3 days since the announcement, and I can't believe Paizo is saying, we're gonna pay for it, we're gonna write it, and then we're gonna give it all away, just so they have no ability to change it. They're giving it to someone with 0 stake in the TTRPG game. I think the current rumor is that it's going to Linux, and that is just hilarious to me, how freaking Chad that is. We're making it, but just in case we live long enough to see ourselves become the villain, we're not keeping it. It's fantastic.
I think we'll have to really wait for Wizards of the Coast to clearly define what they're actually going to do.
As from Paizo's standpoint, the OGL has been a mutually beneficial license that should not, and according to them, cannot be revoked.
I do find it to be very problematic that you can say everything is open and you can do whatever you want with it, and then you can just change your mind. If you tell people it's okay, and they're doing it, and then you can't just change your fucking mind randomly.
Exactly.
And then say, hey, we're going to take your fucking money. It's not fair. It's like, effectively, this is not good for anyone. It's predatory. It's not beneficial. And you're effectively using a legal system to steal money from people under a false pretense.
That is exactly it. That is so well worded. I feel like it's the words I've been looking for but couldn't put together. Predatory is probably the best term for it, just because of how misleading it makes the original OGL. If this was always the plan, which it wasn't, obviously. There's people who were there at the 2000 signing of OGL 1.0 that were there to make it open for open's sake, for the good of the community. But the fact that they are using this open gaming license to use open gaming content for free to effectively rug pull the companies built on that. They're trying to pull the rug out from under the company so they suddenly start owing Wizards money because of corporate greed. It's just flat out abuse of the community, abuse of their third-party developers, and just completely taking advantage of community loyalty for the sake of making money. Predatory is the perfect word.
The co-founder of the law firm that Paizo uses, Brian Lewis, who works at Azora Law, was the attorney for Wizards who came up with the legal framework for the OGL when it was
So he was the one who wrote the ancient text.
created. Paizo's also worked very closely with Ryan Dancy, who was the person who made the OGL in the first place.
So that means that if it ever did come to legal, they could actually use the people that wrote it originally to discern what the intent was.
That's something I hadn't considered from a legal standpoint, is like, copyrightable mechanics aside, what is the legal weight of the author's intent of a contract. Obviously, intent is much more ethereal. It is not legally binding, but I think it could have some serious weight on a court case. If the paralegal and the employee who wrote up the draft came together and basically were witnesses at this court case and mentioned that the OGL was never designed as a monetary gaining contract, a monetary contract whatsoever, I wonder if that would be able to push the court of law in favor of Paizo in this case. As Paizo said, they are willing to tackle Wizards head-on in court. And if Ryan Dancey and Azora Law's co-founder came into the court and said this, I'm wondering if that would have a huge change on how the judge views the contract. That would be fascinating, because it would be a twist that was not even legally binding. You know what it is? It's rules as intended versus rules as written. The contract may have loopholes that Hasbro is taking advantage of, rules as written, but when the freaking author comes in and says, this is rules as intended, that has to mean something.
There would never be like, it's not like, oh, this was written 300 years ago. We can't ask the people that wrote it, what did you mean by this?
That they are prepared to argue that in court if need be, but frankly, they would rather not do so because they don't have any interest in Wizards' new OGL, and that they have a different idea to begin with. Now, that
is crazy. And like the fact that they're willing to go to war against Wizards of the Coast, which is owned by Hasbro, that means that they probably have an extremely strong case.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, are they that guy? I feel like he might be that guy. I mean, shit. Obviously, like, Hasbro is, like, on no level of, like, fucking Disney, right? But Hasbro and, like, Wizards of the Coast is, like, a massive fucking company.
Yeah, even just financially, Paizo probably makes 2 to 5% of what Wizards does in revenue and overall dispensable income. Maybe it's higher than that. I don't know the specifics. I'm not a lawyer. But they technically, if the thing that's so terrifying about this is the thing going around is court stalling, is that Wizards Hasbro has the money to take it from court to court to court to court to court to keep refighting and restarting this case and just wait Paizo out until they back off. I have heard that there are apparently things in place in the US legal system to prevent this. So I've heard both cases. There's people saying that court stalling is a thing. There's people saying court stalling is illegal. So I don't know. But I think if Paizo's case is strong enough, they could not even get it to multiple court cases to be stalled.
Did these people think that they have a chance at winning this at all? There's a reason for it.
Pathfinder 2e is published under the OGL, but it doesn't actually really use any of it. And they only published it with the OGL to allow other companies to use Paizo's work.
Which is absolute Chad. Again, I'll bring this up in the OGL for those of you who aren't aware. So the only reason Paizo used the OGL in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is because of Section 5, Representation of Authority to Contribute. Basically, by contributing their own open game content and subscribing to the OGL, they are allowing anyone else who subscribes to the OGL to use Pathfinder 2e's open game content. So anything within the Pathfinder 2e system that falls under the OGL's definition of open game content can now be used and derived by other developers and publishers. In a way, they did this so if someone wanted to make a mechanical mishmash baby of the 3.5 SRD, 5.0 SRD, and the Pathfinder 2 open game content, someone could take all of that, roll it up into a big dough ball, and then iron it out and bake it into a brand new role-playing system. And that's just out of the goodness of their heart. Straight up. This had no direct benefit to Paizo outside of third-party developers using their content. For example, if they didn't use the OGL, Sinclair's Library, my company, would not be able to use any of the Pathfinder 2e content. No one would be allowed to homebrew and publish third-party content for PF2 without some kind of other license, which is almost why Paizo is just making their own license at this point. They thought they could trust the OGL. The OGL is getting revoked and changed, so they're making their own with blackjack and hookers. In fact, forget the blackjack and the hookers.
Paizo goes on to basically explain their plans for an open RPG creative license that they are referring to as ORC, or the ORC, and that the...
So basically they're saying that if Dungeons and Dragons isn't going to do this, they'll do it themselves.
Literally. That's
just
literally
with some different variants. That's pretty crazy.
Right?
A few months of products will still have the OGL 1.0A in there, and then while the creative license is still being worked on, they simply will continue publishing without a license, period, because as they stated farther up in the statement, they don't actually need to use the OGL at this point. And then once...
So what they're saying effectively is that their own work has diverged so much from Dungeons and Dragons at this point, it's no longer necessary for them to rely on on that license in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like PoE and Diablo. Yeah, it's like Genshin and Breath of the Wild.
Honestly.
It's like there's a lot of games that originally they might have started as kind of an offshoot, but they've evolved into their own thing.
Yeah, it's really easy to claim that something is derivative, and as such, it owes the original content something. You know, like Dark Souls owes Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for inspiration on its, you know, third-person, rotating camera, timing style gameplay, but it really doesn't. Everything is derivative of something, and you can't copyright inspiration. Now, you know, if Dark Souls copied the story, copied the world, copied everything to a T, you know, if it had, you know, 3 to 20 heart containers instead of a health meter, then you might have some room to claim a lawsuit or some kind of copyright. But they've derived from that formula. They've changed it to the point where the content is no longer the same as it was. It is so different that while there is still clear inspiration of what it was derived from, it is now considered new content, and as such does not owe the original content anything aside from maybe a nice thank you for the inspiration.
Pathfinder's a big deal to me. I enjoy it a lot, so I think it's good that they're moving away from D&D altogether, even its license, and that they're doing so in a way that benefits everyone, not just themselves.
And I think this will also help the entire tabletop genre separate itself from colloquially being known as D&D. This is not going to be an overnight change. I think for the next at least 5 years, anyone who's going to play a tabletop RPG will just say, it's kind of like D&D. But the more it splits up into subgenres of the game, the more other games have a fighting chance and get more publicity like D&D, the more it'll become like the gaming industry. You know, when you go to play a video game, you don't say, I'm gonna go play Mario when you're playing Elden Ring. No, maybe you'll say Elden Ring is like Dark Souls, or it's an action RPG. We'll start talking about things by genre. We'll talk about tabletop games as genres rather than kind of like D&D.
But
Yeah,
furthermore, it also assuages some concerns of my own about the potential for further Pathfinder games,
Yes.
with the licensing situation around that.
Give us a second edition video game! Please! The 3-action economy is made for a video game! Oh, it would be great. You could have so much fun with the conditions and the character builds, the customization. Anyway.
As a channel, knowing that there will be an option for people who want to use these types of rule sets and bring them to video games without having to be forced into a deal with Wizards of the Coast specifically is honestly great news.
That's a huge can of worms that can be its own video. This means that if someone wants to, as long as they don't use any IP of Paizo's, they can subscribe to this new license and publish a Pathfinder 2e system video game. Similar to how Solasta is not owned by Wizards of the Coast, but uses the 5e SRD, people can use Pathfinder 2e content under the ORC license, and as long as they make their own world, their own characters, and don't use any proper nouns and intellectual property, that's completely valid, which means if you're a game designer, please start working on a PF2 system because I want it.
I think that's what Wizards of the Coast is going to realize, is that there are so many things that you really just can't copyright. And the uniqueness of Dungeons and Dragons is not offset by the amount of annoying fucking hoops that somebody has to jump through in order to use their content. It's kind of like what happened. I think I used this example before. It's what happened with Nintendo games on YouTube. Like, obviously you had people that were making video games on YouTube. of course. Video games on YouTube, videos about Nintendo games on YouTube, excuse me. Obviously, there weren't as many of them, though. And most other people, why would you go and make content for a Nintendo game whenever you have to deal with this big, annoying creator program, whenever you can just make videos for any other game and not have to deal with any of it at all? So it's such common sense that somebody's going to just go and do something else.
Which, yeah, I think we're going to see a TTRPG renaissance here on YouTube. I already see a ton of other creators who want to start trying out Pathfinder 2E, other systems. People are going to cover Cthulhu, Cyberpunk, probably because it's so big with the Netflix series and the video game. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more content for a lot more games, because A, they know it'll be more safe to do so, and B, a lot of that community loyalty to D&D Wizards has been lost. They have crushed it and thrown it in the garbage, and other game systems are going to be there to pick these creators out of the garbage and take them home. This metaphor is getting weird. But yeah, I think it'll be a renaissance.
Changes to that system and burning your own trust and bridges makes people hesitant to do business with you, which could result in fewer games.
Nobody
but
wants to
hopefully
build
this will be a solution to that, which is why I wanted to cover it. And I'm honestly glad to see Paizo leading the charge on this one, I am a big fan of Pathfinder.
I think that if they just came out and they said, yeah, we were going to do this, but it seems like you guys are going to fucking go apeshit if we do this, so we're not going to do it, I'd be like, okay, fine. That's what they should do.
That's exactly what I said in my video yesterday. Is stop lying, stop pretending it was a mistake, stop pretending it was a rough draft written up by an intern's cousin who was trying to make a cool idea. Just come out and say, we were wrong. We fucked up. We were wrong. We're sorry. We're not going to do anything. We see all of you who want the original OGL to stay. Cool. Let's keep it that way. But they're not.
There's a good thing where, like, or a good chance that they just simply don't fucking know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's it. Asmon's been echoing a lot of my thoughts. Like, that update on D&D Beyond was not orchestrated by a designer or a developer. It might have been written by them to try to make it as easy and soft as possible, but the terms they use, the reasoning behind all of their word choice, that's all CEO and bigwig, which are not connected to the game or the community at all. The CEO of Hasbro does not see your D&D table. They don't even see most D&D tables. They see Critical Role, they see Stranger Things, they might see Matt Colville, but they don't see you. So they aren't making choices with you in mind. They're barely making choices with Matt Colville in mind. They're making choices with money and money alone in mind. They're making choices with D&D Beyond subscriptions in mind. What can they do to make you rely on D&D Beyond more so you will upgrade your subscription to a higher tier? That's why everyone unsubscribed, because they knew that was the only way that we, as a single person, could send any kind of a message. And boy, did we. That was hilarious.
They just simply don't fucking know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They have people that are in charge of this kind of stuff, and the people don't know how to make the right decisions.
They don't.
And they just made a big fucking mistake. And I think that that's probably true. I think that the leadership for Wizards of the Coast clearly has a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't have this and then right off of this was like the magic 30-year thing.
Yeah, that was its own thing.
That's like a fundamental disconnect with understanding the player base.
Exactly what I said.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably people in executive leadership that probably should really sit down and, you know, have some focus groups and talk to some actual, you know, go to some comic book stores and
reconnect with your audience, your demographic.
Products, you know what I mean?
Like, the mind-boggling thing, and, you know, Asmongold's not super far out of the TTRPG market. The video game and TTRPG audiences are very, very similar in a lot of ways. But the fact that someone with no stake in the fight, and I don't think Asmongold plays D&D. If he does, I apologize. I don't know. But the fact that someone like Asmongold, from a complete outside perspective, can see exactly what is wrong. You know, you don't need to play the games. You don't need to be the person being wronged to see why it's wrong. And I think that's what's crazy about this whole situation, is there is nobody on Hasbro's side. Even watching from the outside, like Moist Critical, who I think has played some D&D, he mentioned, but people who don't even play D&D can look at this whole case and within 5 minutes realize, yeah, Wizards fucked up. That's what's so backwards about everything here is even if Wizards of the Coast backpedals, a lot of people are going to sign on to the Orc license and make content based on Pathfinder because it's similar enough in theme, and they know Paizo's not going to screw them over sometime in the future. I think we're more likely to see Pathfinder get a Pathfinder, if that makes sense. Someone's going to take the Pathfinder rule set and make its own company, its own offshoot using the Orc license and change enough that it becomes its own beast and maybe in 20 years grows to its own gargantuan company to compete with Pathfinder, which is the point of an open game license. That's the point and goal of the Orc license, is to increase and encourage competition, not to monopolize. That's a really cool ending line. End it there,